The following feature presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Power on. It's showtime.
Boldly go where no one has gone before.
Warp 1, engage!
Welcome to a journey through time, space, and pop culture. A journey through a career in the special effects industry. Welcome to the MAX EFX Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Toft. Welcome back to the MAX EFX Podcast, where we go behind the scenes of many films, TV shows, commercials, and fandom with special effects artist Max Cervantes. This is episode 12, making Max's Mastercom cosplay outfit for Star Wars Celebration 2022. Hey, Max, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Kevin. But in my day, we called it costuming.
Well, it's just, it's what the kids do these days.
Yeah, I know. These kids now, get off my lawn, you kids.
Well, I know we want to get started into this, but I know you had something you wanted to talk about really quick.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry that we haven't put out a new episode since April, but I've been really busy with work. Summer started, personal things in my life going on, and just a lot of things have been going on, and that's what's prevented us from doing another episode since then. And in the meantime, I also wanted to pay tribute to a good friend of mine, Jein, who basically helped me get started in the film business. He was the very first person to ever hire me professionally in the business. Unfortunately, Greg passed away earlier this year, actually about 2 months ago.
Sorry about that.
I was sort of basically asked not to talk about it by my friends who had entrusted me with the information, because Greg had such a vast, and I'm talking vast, that he had 2 or 3 storage facilities full of memorabilia, original costumes, original props, original artwork, original models, that his family were afraid that people would swarm down on to these and try to get things out of the collection. But anyways, that being said, Greg was a wonderful, wonderful guy. I first met Greg at a convention way back in the late 70s, I think like 78, 79. I had entered a model kit of the Millennium Falcon, which I'd entered in the art show. And I saw Greg and I recognized him from seeing him in some of the magazines of the day. And Greg is mostly known for being a superb model maker as well as special effects supervisor. He built the mothership for Close Encounters. He was the special effects supervisor for Spielberg's 1941. I mean, They built a giant model of
Santa Monica, yeah,
of the Santa Monica Pier era, like during World War II, for Spielberg's comedy 1941. They built a huge long section of Hollywood Boulevard, very accurate again to the era of 1941 Los Angeles during World War II. And so he's done so many other hundreds of things. He worked on Star Trek The Next Generation. He worked on so many things. It would take me days.
And Max, if he had only done those things you just listed, he would walk on water.
Oh, exactly.
You know what I mean? But we do go in. Okay, so if you go back to our first episode, our early episodes, we discuss the genesis of Max's career. And in episode 1 and 2 and 3, I'm sure Jein is mentioned, and Max explains how it helped him get started in the career, and he's very woven into Max's early years on the show.
Yeah, and as we record this episode, in about a week, next Friday, they'll be having his memorial. It will be live streamed for those people who can't be there. I'll put up a link for Kevin, I'll get you a link for the live stream for those people who can't be there.
So that'll be on our Facebook group page for Max
Right.
FX.
Exactly. I'll put up the live stream link there.
Okay.
So the people who can't be there, because the family is trying to make it a very small affair. It will be recorded, so even if you don't watch the live stream, you can always go back and watch it later afterwards. But you'll be able to get to it from the link that we'll put up in the Max FX podcast Facebook group.
Excellent.
But yeah, Greg is going to be greatly missed, and he wasn't just an amazing artist, but he also was an amazing friend and mentor to not just me, but to lots of other people who he helped out, helping them out in their careers, getting people started off. But also, he was an amazing archivist because he loved this stuff just like I do, just like the rest of us do. But he was also there at just the right time to amass a huge collection of things because, back in the late 70s, the studios just didn't care about these things.
No, of course not.
They're one and done. They use them, they get put away in a big storage warehouse. If they get used again, that's fine. And if they don't, well, they don't. And many times they'd end up getting thrown out. And a lot of the studios back in the late 70s were, desperate for money. The film industry had kind of hit upon a hard time. That's why you had things going on like 20th Century Fox sold off their massive backlot. And that's why we have Century City Shopping Center now, because that was all part of 20th Century Fox's backlot land.
Wow.
Same thing with MGM. MGM needed money, and so they sold off tons and tons of stuff that was in their, warehouses of stored costumes, props, scenery. That's how Robbie the Robot ended up being sold, and Robbie's car being sold because of these sort of big auctions. And Greg was there at just the right time and just the right place.
Oh, that's fantastic.
To acquire a lot of things of this similar nature. Greg loaned me out his huge collection of original Star Trek, TOS Star Trek costumes and props and artwork. Yes, for Worldcon in Anaheim. This would be at least about 15, maybe 20 years ago. And that's the first time most of the stuff had ever been seen in public. I was approached because I knew the people running Worldcon, and I came up with the idea saying, hey, it's going to be the 40th anniversary of Star Trek. We need to do something for it special. And I came up with the idea of putting on an exhibit, the 40 years of Star Trek told through costuming and props. And I was still actively working on all the different Star Trek shows of the time, like Next Gen and Deep Space Nine.
And he allowed you to display them?
And Greg, he not only did it allow me to display them, but he brought his own mannequins to put the costumes on. He brought his own glass display cases to put all his props in. And I was the only person who was allowed to have the key to the display cabinets.
Of course.
So once I put that stuff in there, it got locked up and nobody could get into it except for me and Greg. And
wow,
none of that stuff had ever been seen in public since,
so it's gone back in his archive. It's still there. And
yeah, still there. And so it was amazing. And that shows you the kind of love for fandom. Now,
are we talking like primary stuff? You saw like command uniforms and science and
and one of a kind objects. Like he had Mark Leonard's original Romulan commander's costume from the iconic episode Balance of Terror. There was only one of that costume made, and Greg had it. He had one of Captain Kirk's green wraparound costumes, of which I think there was only 4 of those made.
Right. Wow.
And so he had a lot of one-of-a-kind objects, both prop and costume-wise, from the episode Space Seed, which introduced Han.
Ooh.
Okay. He had one of the women's sleeper suits when we first see.
Wow, really?
It was like this flimsy gold mesh.
Yeah.
Like, hand stitched into a bodysuit, because this stuff was a mesh so that it would fit over this beautiful woman's body. And Greg had one of those suits somehow. and we put it up on a mannequin and displayed it.
I'll bet
Like I said,
everybody loved that.
it was the first time all of this stuff had ever been seen in public, and Greg entrusted me with this stuff so that other fans could enjoy it and photograph it and just revel in how awesome all this stuff was that he had. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of Greg's sort of collection, because his collection wasn't limited to just Star Trek. He had all sorts of props and models and miniatures from all sorts of other things as well. And if Greg is to remembered for anything, I want Greg to remembered for what a kind, gentle soul he was, because he didn't seek the limelight. He wasn't one of these self-aggrandizing guys who would always go around saying, "Well, I've got such and such in my collection." It's like he just enjoyed having them, and if people wanted to see them, Greg would sometimes pull things out and let them see them. I have photographs of an original Star Trek series, the original series, primary, what we would call the hero phaser pistol. And he brought it out of his collection and let me come to his shop and let me take photographs of it just for myself because I wanted to make one, And Greg, his shop was down in Mar Vista, and it was just like half a block away from where I was working when I was working for Bob Short when we were doing Beetlejuice and Captain Power and those other shows at that time period. And I went down the alley because they were just on the same alley, and I walked the half down to visit Greg during lunchtime, and I walk into his shop, and there is the freaking mothership from Close Encounters sitting in the middle of it. And I practically laid an egg. I was in such nerd.
As I think would anybody.
Yeah.
That would see that.
When I got to asking Greg about it, he said, "Yeah, the Smiths," because Greg and Spielberg had donated it to the Smithsonian because it's such an iconic object, and it was a one of a kind. And they sent it back to him because somebody at the museum left it on overnight, and it burned out one of the transformers that lit all the neon tubing on the inside. Thank God nothing caught fire or melted, but they didn't want to do any work to it themselves, and so they sent it back to Greg. And it wasn't small, so imagine creating something up that big and sending it back. And
I've seen pictures of it. It was not small.
Just, no, not in any way. But and neither was Greg. I mean, Greg was just like a titan in the film industry. Like I said, for both his talent and his kindness. And I just want people to know how much I cherished him as a friend and as a mentor. And he will be very fondly remembered.
Okay, well, let's start talking about Max's Mastercom cosplay for Star Wars Celebration 2022.
Costume.
Right. Yes. I at a position where I didn't really know who Mastercom was until you told me. I was busy playing with the toys. I wasn't reading the Star Wars comic books. Richard knows a great deal about this stuff. Richard over on Classic Marvel Star Wars Comics over on the main channel at Skywalking Through Neverland. He knows everything. He's read everything. And then, of course, Max, you've always been a source of information for me. Who is Mastercom for people that don't know?
Well, Mastercom is a character that was created for the Marvel Star Wars comic books that came out after the original film Star Wars came out, but before The Empire Strikes Back. And basically, the story arc is like a 5-issue story arc, which is pretty long for a comic book series to do. And Mastercom is the administrator for Lord Greyshade, or Governor Greyshade, as he's sometimes referred to, who owns a giant, massive space station called the Wheel. And think of it like as Las Vegas in space, or even like Cloud City before Cloud City was anything,
Wait, how about a combination between Cloud City and Canto Bight?
I like it better more as Cloud City and Las Vegas, because there's all sorts of illegal gambling going on in this place. At one point in the comic, Han is tricked into having to be in a gladiatorial game against some huge, monstrous creature. And that's just one of the little storylines going on in it. But Mastercom is Governor Greyshade's protocol droid who runs the space station. And apparently he was originally built as a cargo loading droid, which is why he's this very big, thick built looking droid, because he was built for doing lots of heavy manual labor and then being repurposed and reprogrammed into being the station's administrator. Personally, I kind of thought that he picked him because he being a big, bulky droid, he would be more intimidating, especially when you're dealing with all these underworld types, rather than this really thin kind of like C-3PO like droid,
Right, who's definitely more for negotiating stuff or interacting with delegates. Definitely Mastercom looks like a buff C-3PO, and the beautiful color of blue.
He looks like he's not meant to be given any guff or take any bullshit from anybody. But I really liked it because I thought, what, I've always liked the character of 3PO. I've always liked droids. Anybody who knows me, I love robots. R2-D2 and Boba Fett are my two favorite Star Wars characters. And I'd always wanted a costume as 3PO, but with my frame, my body, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to fit one of those things.
Max, just in case people want a place where they can go learn more about this character, over on YouTube under Classic Marvel Star Wars Comics, if you look for the issues 18 through 23 is where they cover the Mastercom story arc over there. And that way, if somebody does get curious beyond seeing the costume, they want to really know what it was like in the comic books, this is probably the best place on the internet for really anything to do with the Marvel Star Wars comics is handled by Richard and Sarah.
Yeah, they did such a great job with all of those. I even learned a lot about those old Marvel Star Wars comics myself from watching those.
Yeah. So now you wanted to build him, as you were saying, because you've always wanted a protocol droid outfit for yourself, but you're buff. And just so happens that over at Marvel, they provided you with a protocol droid that would fit your frame, and that is Mastercom.
Yeah, because he's, like I said, he's kind of a big built droid. And I had been thinking about this for quite some time. I did a internet search and I found that somebody out there digitized all of those old comics, and I was able to get those and use all those digital images, went through the different issues to find all the best pictures I found for like the different parts of his body. And, I have to also give credit that Mastercom was designed by Carmine Infantino, who was the lead artist on those comic books. But the problem with being a comic book artist is that, you have to churn these things out really fast. They don't have a lot of time to make sure that every single drawing of every single character is always exactly the same. So there's a lot of, shall we say, artistic liberty and changes from panel to panel. You might
some
find
variations.
Yeah, of the same character. But that kind of works good for me because then I'm able to take, well, I like the shape of the head in this one. I like the shape of the arms in that one. And so you kind of pick and choose from what you like best. Not to mention you're having to then, re-engineer things so it fits on a real human body.
Right.
And so I kind of went at it from that point of view. And I started the costume knowing I wanted to have it done to wear it for Star Wars Celebration 2022 in Anaheim. But I really didn't get serious about it till about 2.5 months before the convention.
Wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
And doing it all by myself, everything is handmade. It got really, really hairy towards the end. There was quite a few days where I was working 10 to 12-hour days every day of the week to get it done. Luckily, where I work at Vision Scenery in Sylmar, California, my boss, Carl Horner, as well as my other boss, Fernando, who owns shop, one of the three owners, I should say, they just let me have carte blanche and let me go in whenever I wanted to and work on my suit whenever I needed to and use all the machinery and tools that we have there at my disposal. We have three different vacuum forming machines. I made the whole suit vacuum formed, which is the way the original Stormtroopers have always been done, vacuum formed. And I just figured, well, I'm a pretty damn fast sculptor. We had just done a big job for some other client. I can't say the name because that project hasn't come out yet, but we got left with a lot of leftover high density urethane foam scraps. And a lot of these scraps were big enough that I was able to make all the body parts for my droid. I first started by sculpting out the feet because I figured, well, I'll start with something I know that isn't going to change much. And I started off with the feet. I kind of got inspired by looking at the designs of RoboCop's feet. So I kind of was based a little bit off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sculpted those up in an afternoon, vacuum formed them. And then just kept going on from there. I decided I would do the arms next because, again, we had done a project for Paramount, which was the Jackass City model we had done for them. And if you want more information about that, you can go back to one of our past episodes where we talk about the work we did for Paramount on the Jackass Forever movie. But we ended up with a lot of scrap tubing. And this tubing was very thin wall, but extremely strong plastic called ABS. So I decided, with my boss Carl's approval, to use some of the scrap tubing, and that's what I made the arms out of.
Right.
Because I knew that on the original 3PO suits, the arms were made out of metal.
Whoa.
And yeah, his arms, even all the way back to the original Star Wars, they're made out of steel. Very thin-walled steel, but this way they'd be strong and lightweight. Well, I'm not really great at doing metal work, and I didn't want to do that. That was going to be way more expensive, take more time, while I could do all the work in plastic myself. So I used a thin-walled ABS tubing, it's more than strong enough, and I just kept plowing through it one piece at a time and literally engineering things on the fly.
Which you did document on your Facebook page. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
gone ahead and I've gone through and I've downloaded what I think are the key moments of that, in showing the bucks that you made for the vacuum form, also some of the imagery you were using. So I'm going to make a folder on our group page over there on Facebook for Max FX, and people will be able to kind of get an idea if you just look at all these photos, really what you went through. And actually some of the tools you have in there, it's quite simple. I see a number 2 pencil. I see a basic X-Acto knife. I see, like a rasp for, shaping. And then some of the ways that you lined up your images on the foam to sculpt the head, which is amazing.
Well, and part of that is that, they're great drawings for inspiration, but then you have to modify those original drawings from the comic book to make it work in the real life and make it fit on a real human. I being pretty good as an artist and proportions and such, I knew I wanted to make Mastercom's head look smaller so that it would make the rest of his body in proportion look bigger. So you still carry off this whole idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
He's this big, heavy lifting droid that's been repurposed. And so that helmet that I made for Mastercom, there's only about a little more than a quarter of an inch gap all the way around my own head. So it's pretty tight quarters. I mean, you remember when you first saw it in my hotel room at Celebration, and then you helped me put it on. What a learning curve that was. And you were shocked at how tight fit the helmet was on me, but that was intended. That was,
well, it was making me nervous because of around your ears. I didn't want to hurt you.
Yeah,
because that's where it gets the tightest, is really around the perimeter of your skull, where going around your ears, around the top of your head. That's where all the connection points are. So that was the scariest part for me.
right. But yet the the design of the droid's head has these ear cup like pieces, so that once my ears are in them, they're pretty safe. But yeah, getting it in place is the hard
Now,
part.
the knees, let's talk about those for just a sec. You had a little help from our friend Gordon Tarpley.
Yeah, my buddy Gordon Tarpley, I reached out to him as far back as last January. You and I had dinner with Gordon and another friend of ours from Props to History over
Yep.
there in Burbank, remember, at Bob's
Yep.
Big
Yep.
Boy. And that's when I first hit up Gordon. I said, "Hey, Gordon, I have this idea. I want to do this suit, Mastercom, and blah, blah, blah." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember that character from the old comics." Said, "I want to do him up, but since you've already got 3D files for all of 3PO for when you built your own suit, do you think you could blow those bad boys up to my size and just print me a pair of knees?" And so we eventually got together months later and did exactly that. Gordon did a quick measurement around the top of my knee, so that he would have a size to know how big to make these new knees, and reprinted them basically in my scale. But that's the only part of the whole suit that's 3D printed, those knees. Otherwise, everything else is made from scratch. I did cheat a little bit in that, knowing I was running out of time. I had another friend of mine who makes Stormtrooper armor for friends and fans, and I got a set of his Stormtrooper legs, but those were still not big enough to fit my thighs and calves, and so I had to refit those and spend a lot of time refitting them and making them, you know, I must have added at least 6 inches in the front and the back so that they would fit my size of my legs, because I'm a big guy. And just kept going on and on, just plowing through it day by day. And I, I spent a couple of days driving around and calling different AutoZone auto supply stores, tracking down more of that
That blue.
very unique,
Yeah.
blue paint. And it's made by the Duplicolor color company, which basically makes replacement automotive quality enamel paint for cars. And they call that color, it's a General Motors GM color called medium quasar blue. And if you've seen pictures of it, that's one thing, but actually to see it up close, there's this really unique, like small grain, like I don't know what else to call it. Sort of
Metallic?
like it's like a metallic, like a iridescent blue powder
Okay.
suspended in the blue paint. But it doesn't really register on film. But oh my God, it looks great in person.
Yeah.
That's what all my coworkers would say when
Right.
while I was painting these pieces. They'd see them outside while I was outside in our painting area, and they go, "Wow, that blue is just amazing." And just keep. I think I ended up buying like 15, maybe almost 15 cans or more of that paint, because
Wow.
it didn't come in big full size cans. They were like a 3/4 sized can, because it's meant to be touch up paint. So
Right.
they
Right.
don't expect somebody wanting that much of it. But so
So yeah, so the reason the knees, I would say 3D printed, is they have to interlock in such a way. And Gordon is the reason we went to Gordon, to tell everybody. Gordon is a C3PO.
Yes.
Who occasionally does C3PO and some other droid work for Lucasfilm from time to time. So he knows about all the joints and stuff like that. And he was able to help you get a knee that worked for you.
Well, and because of the way 3PO's knees are built, they literally have to slide over and interfit into each other. And I was like, okay, I could do that from scratch, but I don't have the time.
If you had another 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just easier to have Gordon blow up his file that he already had, so it would fit my larger frame. And then I got really inventive about some parts. On the side of 3PO's knees, there are these piston-like, cylinder-like things that are mounted to the outboard side of his knees. And again, I got creative with it because luckily, since Mastercom is a different droid, it doesn't have to be exactly like what are on 3POs. He's like a different model. It'd be like the difference between a Mustang as compared to a Cadillac. You would have different things on different models of cars. The same thing with different types of droids. So I went to my favorite. I went to Lowe's Home Improvement store in the plumbing department, and I found all sorts of little plastic plumbing parts, and I glued them together in different manners. I think they were originally parts of a drip irrigation system, and those became the little pistons on the outboard side of the knees. The large pistons that are on the back side of the arms of the triceps on the arms, again, they came from Lowe's Home Improvement hardware store. Those were the spring mechanisms that would pull a screen door shut. I was walking down one of the aisles. I saw these pistons. I go, that's perfect. I can use that. I can just modify it slightly. And at that price, that's way cheaper than me having to build that from scratch.
Anytime you can get a shortcut, right?
Yeah. And that's what I did. And I literally did that. I took the door spring mechanism apart. I was afraid at first, thinking, is this thing full of hydraulic fluid or what's inside it? So I left it in the vacuum form packaging, and I very carefully took my Dremel tool with a fiberglass cutoff wheel, and I made a small puncture mark in the tubing, not knowing what
was going to happen.
Yeah, is this thing full of pressurized oil? Is it suddenly going to like spray oil in my face? So I left it in the packaging, knowing that would help
contain
whatever. Yeah. Luckily, nothing happened.
Just air.
Yeah, it's not even air. There is a piston, like a piston head with a rubber O-ring on it, and at the top there's a little tiny screw where you can readjust the valve, like a valve. So it controls how much air goes in and out. And then there's a spring inside. That's all that was inside it. So I just went ahead and disassembled it, shortened the length of the piston so it would fit where I wanted it. Yeah. And I was good to go. That was an easy
we have some pictures of that will be posted in the thing. So you were very diligent about that. Let's talk about going to Star Wars Celebration 22.
Well, I was doing this so much right up to the last minute that I actually missed. Yeah, I missed the very first day of the convention. I missed Thursday because I was still at the shop finishing the torso, finishing the chest and back. I had vacuum formed it the night before. I was at the shop until midnight getting the tools ready. I vacuum formed it on our massive 4-foot by 8-foot vacuum former. Okay, this machine is big enough that it can vacuum form a full 4x8 sheet all at one time. And I had taken advantage of that massive size by being able to put the vacuum form tools, the molds for both the front of the chest and the back of the chest onto the machine at the same time.
Right.
And thank goodness it worked the first time, because sometimes you don't always get a good pull the first time.
This is true. This is true.
Have to, the size and the shape many times dictates how long you're going to let the plastic heat up, and how much is it going to sag before you get ready to do it, and all those sort of factors. Thank God it worked the first time, and so I went from there. And then the next day was then spent cutting the parts apart, cleaning up the edges, engineering how the edges are going to go together, engineering and putting in bolts. Literally, there are bolts at the hips and at the shoulders,
right,
that keep everything together when you're wearing it. And so
Max, this was when you got to Anaheim at your hotel room. That was what day?
Late Thursday night. I got there at like 11:30 at night. I'm checking in and unloading my car with all my stuff.
Right, because when I found you on Friday, was it?
Friday.
Yes, Friday. I came to the hotel. You come into Max's room, and it might as well have been a workshop. Except with a lovely bed in the middle, but everything else, all these tools, all these adhesives, and all these parts of Mastercom everywhere.
Yeah, That was the first time actually I ever had the whole suit together in one place because I was literally making a part, getting it done, prepping it, painting it, setting aside, going to the next part.
Yes.
And so when I unpacked everything in my hotel room, I'm like, this is the first time it's all together in one place.
Right.
So as I unwrapped everything, because I had wrapped everything up in brand new, fresh, white, clean t-shirts, so the paint wouldn't get scratched or marred, I laid all the parts out on my bed, and he looked like he was sleeping there. So I have pictures that we'll post in the group. I have pictures of all the parts just laying there on the bed. It's like he's sleeping. And I actually slept that way that night on the other side of the bed while my suit is sleeping on the other side of me.
Well, it
And
was
then,
at least safe.
yeah. And then when I got up in the morning, I'm going through my list of things to make sure I had everything. And, I had been getting up because of the schedule. I'd been getting up pretty early. I had been getting up like at 6 a.m. to make the most amount of my time of day. And while I'm going through my list of everything I knew I needed, that's when I realized in my hurry to get everything packed up into the car and to get to the convention, I forgot something, probably the most important thing you could have for the convention. I forgot my tickets.
Oh, that's right.
I had put them away in a very safe place at home in my dresser. And that's when I called my husband, Daryl, and I called him, honey, I'm coming home. And I explained the situation. I got in my car at like 7 a.m. and I rushed all the way back home, which is an hour's trip from Anaheim to where I live, grabbed my tickets, gave my husband a kiss goodbye, and I got back in the car and I drove back to the convention.
Right.
So I could have a little bit of time to finish.
Well, that's when I met up with you at the hotel.
Exactly.
And then I saw the totality of this.
This disaster in the making. Although I have to take it.
No.
It wasn't that bad because thank goodness the hotel room was really nice. It was La Quinta Inn and Suites in Anaheim. It had like a bedroom area with a TV. Then there was a sitting room area also with a TV, but it had a nice big desk and a nice big couch and coffee table. So I took full advantage.
It was a workshop. It was turned into a workshop.
All this extra space, but I did. I brought my Dremel. I brought my electric drill. I brought my hot melt gun. I brought all these glues and adhesives. I brought a touch-up paint. I brought all sorts of stuff to finish out the rest of the suit.
So here's the kicker for me. I roll in there and we're already late. I'm looking at the time going because Skywalking Through Neverland had a panel. It was
our panel that we had to be there.
Skywalking Through Neverland variety show at Star Wars Celebration, which is, you can see that over on Skywalking Through Neverland. But we had to be there at a very certain time.
Yes.
And Mastercom was not done in several ways, little ways.
I would say the main way is that in my rush to get everything done, I hadn't quite engineered out how the shoulder bells would stay attached to the chest and back units. And I quickly, cobbled something together. It worked for the amount of time we had to be there.
Yeah.
And then we had to go through the arduous task of getting to the convention. And you have to remember, I had been getting maybe at the most 5 to 6 hours of sleep every night for a couple of weeks. So I was a little brain depleted, and we decided that, we're just going to call an Uber. We'll just call a big old van Uber, and I'll get into the costume.
Right. We'll just shove Max in the back of a van.
Yeah, and we'll go to the convention, right? Wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd built a lot of articulation into the costume.
I was very mobile, but to get into that van was such a hassle.
Yeah.
Not to mention then the van could only take us so far, because even though you had gone online and gotten my badge activated and gotten my COVID protocol information all activated, we still had to go through their checkpoint.
Yes.
Get stuff done with the convention, which meant walking, which is when we discovered that like I said, this was my very first time ever putting everything together in one place and wearing everything.
We were learning things.
Everything worked great except for the left ankle the calf on the left leg was too tight. And with every step, it felt like I was being stabbed in my foot and ankle, which I incredibly understood now what poor Anthony Daniels must have gone through. Because he said something like that happened to him very much the first day for him in wearing the suit. And this was the first day of him shooting in location in Tunisia. And there's behind the scenes footage where you can see him fall over.
Oh yeah.
He's desperately trying to climb up those sand dunes. And he said he was in just so much pain because the ankles and other parts of the legs were pinching him and biting him and cutting him.
Well, now you know.
Yeah, and I knew. But luckily for me, it was just that one. But still, it's a long ways to walk from. What hotel was it they were doing the COVID security check we had to go
I think it was the Marriott there.
Yeah, that the distance from the Marriott to the convention center is still not a short distance when you're
especially when you're in
walk.
pain. Yeah.
And then we had to talk. We had to talk our way through the security checkpoint.
Well, we had to get through we got through a shortcut. Fortunately, Ernie came down, and he knew. Well, he had a relationship with one of the guards there on the short side of we got through. We didn't have to go the long way, which saved you probably a lot.
Well, because between what Ernie said to the security guard and me in the suit, I said to the guy, "Look, this is a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of pain in this thing. I can't handle walking all the way back down to where you want me to go and walking back to here. We have to be on a panel really, really soon. Could you please just let us walk through?" And between that and what Ernie had said to the guy, he was like, "Yeah, obviously you guys aren't,
right.
You guys aren't the danger. You're not, you're a guy in pain in a plastic suit."
Yeah, so just so everybody knows what was going on here is we were trying to get Max to the panel for the Skywalking Network variety show, and we had to be there at a very specific time. So here's the rub. Here's what was great. Each show on Skywalking through Neverland was going to be featured in this panel. Of course, one of them being the Max EFX podcast. Of course, Ernie from Collectopolis, who's the other show, my show, co-host. Right, the YouTube show Collectopolis. Ernie was like, "Where are you guys?" That's how he came down and got us at the Marriott where we were doing the COVID. We had to get your COVID wristband, and so that's how Ernie,
which was hilarious, putting a COVID wristband on a droid.
Well, we got to make sure he's safe. Anyhow, so that was the genesis for how, and that was what we were trying to get to. And boy, we got there with, I'm happy to say, 30 minutes to spare. But to me, that's cutting it awfully close, considering everything you had to go through.
Yeah,
and all the things that could have gone way worse. But I wish somebody would have been filming us putting you in and out of the van. It would have been it would have looked like a Charlie Chaplin film. Because I'm like shoving, no, you're like, lift your arm, and I'm like pushing on your torso, and you're trying to fold your legs up, and you're like, no, Kevin, stop it.
And I'm grabbing the handle that's in the ceiling of the travel van, trying to lift my ass up and get myself inside while you're trying to push on my legs.
But now your backside is slippery because it's
all plastic.
It's all plastic, and this was not leather. This was cloth. So guess what? So Max, at one point I thought Max is like a turtle on his back, and then we had to stop at a chair when we got to the Marriott outside, and we were trying to fix something, and then you slipped on the chair and you were stuck in the chair, and I caught you, and
thank God you caught me, otherwise I would have been a turtle and landed on my back.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I mean it was an ordeal, but the good news is we got you in there, and we've got the pictures of Max there, and he looks great. And people recognized Mastercom, right? There were people.
I was surprised because I was expecting nobody to recognize me, but people did,
People read those comics, man.
Yeah.
Just not me. I was playing with my toys. I never was much of a reader. Plus,
how old were you then?
I had, so Star Wars came out and I was 10. So the comic books came out about that time. I remember I had one of them because that was at 7-Eleven, and it says Star Wars, buy it.
Yeah. So you couldn't have been more than, even by the time the comics came out, you couldn't have been more than 12.
Yeah, I didn't have much interest in it, and the toys were so cool, and it was just, that's what I was into. I wasn't really into any comic books at that time.
Right.
So, but later on, I see, oh my God, there's all this great stuff in the comic books, and then of course, Richard and Sarah doing the classic Marvel Star Wars comic show.
Right.
It's like, oh wow, well at least now I'm getting to go through it that way. But there was a lot of cool stuff that happened in those, and Mastercom was one of them, and you knew it and you found it and you did it. And
yeah. Well, like I said, I like doing the obscure characters. What I was prepping for doing a costume for Celebration, I thought I love Boba Fett. He and R2 are my two favorite Star Wars characters.
Been there, done that.
But then I thought, you know what, if I do Fett, I'm just going to be another Fett out of hundreds of people dressed as Fett. I want to do something truly unique, truly completely from scratch.
That you did.
My own work.
That you did.
And that's why I did him.
Well, we talk about that in your episode, your Boba Fett bromance episode, is that when I met you, there were maybe 2-3 Boba Fetts, if that. I never saw. I was aware they might have existed, but you were the only Fett that I knew. That was
way back in the middle to early 90s.
Yeah.
So there weren't, costuming's come a huge distance since then. The amount of people doing it.
Well, there's organized groups now.
Yeah.
Well, the 501st was available back then. It's just okay. I can't remember how many. Let's say there was 100 Boba Fetts. That's not enough to all of them show up at one convention.
Exactly.
You're lucky to get one, maybe two. If they're that dedicated. If and at that time there just weren't that many, and there weren't many Vaders. There were plenty of Stormtroopers. That was a thing. That's kind of how the 501st got started. But as it grew, they started adding more types. You had bounty hunters. You had the Royal Guard. They started spreading. As it got more prevalent, you got more of the characters that were available, but early on back then you were it. And I understand why you would want to do that, be stand out in the crowd.
I wanted to show off. I wanted to do something that would show off my talents as an artist, as a maker, and I just knew that wasn't going to happen if I just became another, oh look, there's another Boba Fett.
Oh, and by the way,
been there, done that, kids. I did that way back in the 80s, so been there, done that.
Very soon, just to let people know, on the Skywalking Through Netherland YouTube channel, they're going to get the entire variety show up there, the whole video. So they'll get to see you, not just the pictures that we're going to post, but you'll get to see Mastercom walk up on stage and then me skillfully remove your helmet.
Yes.
Skillfully in quotes, ladies and gentlemen.
Then you get to see my real face as the helmet comes off, and you can see the wave of relief wash over me. I'm just like sitting there. Oh, I can finally sit down and relax.
Right. So, that was, what a day that was.
Because, I did engineer the suit so that I could sit. Because, again, going back to the stories that Anthony Daniels spoke of, he said he was miserable because he could not sit. They had to build him a special sort of lean board so he could kind of sit on it and lean back to relax on. And I didn't want that to be the case.
No, I want to delineate something here. You did make it so Mastercom can sit.
Yes.
In a chair.
Yes.
Not a car.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I can sit in a chair. I could even sit in those small little chairs you'd find in a convention.
Right.
But not made to sit in a car.
Any kind of car. We tried.
Yeah.
And
boy, a big old van. And that van was a big van. Looking back on it, truthfully, actually, you know what I should have done? I probably should have climbed in, but like faced down, as if I was bending over to pick something up off the ground. I probably should have just got into it like that and kneeled down on the floor and rested my elbows on the seat of the chair.
We decided, you and I talked about it that night at dinner, is we should have just dressed you there.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking because I was so tired, and you weren't thinking because you were like me. You were just stressed about, we got to get to the show on time. We have
I'm
to
like, whatever you want to do, let's do that. Let's go.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. And in my tiredness, I just wasn't thinking. And
It's a miracle. You know what?
Yeah.
It's a miracle. Like the time it took you to do that, and all the artwork you had to do and produce this thing, get in that thing, get you to. It's a miracle we got there. You know,
it really is. You know, another thing that I changed from the way that Anthony Daniels' 3PO suit is built compared to what I did is that I also knew that his range of vision is incredibly limited. If you look at 3PO's helmet, that little black dot, that little like pencil-sized hole that's in the middle of his eye, that's all he can see through. That little pencil-sized, that eraser-sized hole is all he can see through. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be restricted to that. And so that whole large blue reflective lens that is Mastercom's eye, I can see through that whole thing. I found a pair of very lightly tinted blue mirrored plastic lenses. They were sunglasses, and I bought those, and I cut them apart, and I cut them down to just circles, and I mounted that to the back of the eye lens frame, and then mounted the LEDs into that. But I sandwiched the LEDs on the other side of the mirror lens, so
gave
that
you a little bit of a break.
I can't see the LEDs because they're on the other side of the mirrored lens.
It's being bounced.
And exactly. And also I painted the backs of the LEDs silver and then black, so they would reflect more of the light outward, and I can't see those lights. Because when I first tried it, just installing the LEDs on the lens, I could kind of see these bright points of light in the corners of my eye, and I found it distracting. And I thought, okay, if that's distracting for just a little while, think about what it's going to be like after you wear it for a couple hours.
Right.
And that's why I said, no, I'll spend the extra time. And I painted the backside silver and then black to block out the light so it's not blinding me. I mean, there's a lot of things you go through when you're engineering a suit like that. Those knobs that I used to lock myself into the suit, I found those surplus at Apex Electronics here in the San Fernando Valley. Those were old-fashioned 1960s and 70s era TV knobs that I found surplus, and I refitted them with metal threaded bolts so that you could, bolt them. The antenna spike, which is what a lot of the 3PO builders call that spike thing that's at top center of 3PO's helmet. That was a quick disconnect air hose fitting that I found, and I cut off the threaded ends, and I welded a bolt into it so I could just screw it on. So the helmet, the Mastercom's head, goes on with just 3 bolts, which is exactly the way Anthony Daniels' suit is done, with just 3 bolts. So it just holds it all together.
Yeah.
So, but there's still even more work that I'm still doing to the suit even now.
Well, because of what you learned from the show, right?
And because I simply ran out of time of things I wanted to do to it. I had originally envisioned using this silver striping tape on the different body parts to help bring out the shapes, graphic tape. I had done it already to the feet because the feet were the very first things I had built, but I ran out of time to do it to the whole rest of the suit. So that's still something ongoing that I'm going to finish up with. I didn't get to finish doing all the sort of like wiring stuff that you normally see on a protocol droid like 3PO on his midsection and things of that nature. So,
well, and then I know you've got to still work on getting the legs to not hurt you. And
yeah. And mostly that, and I went ahead and I took a heat gun to the part, and I heated up the part, and I very gently stretched it out. I used a bottle, a large, like a wine bottle, so I could use that as a form to push it down and get it to stretch open so it wouldn't bite me so much.
We could put some padding down there too.
Well, and that too. So, because the suit is not a one and done. I didn't spend all that time building it just to only wear it once. I want to be able to wear it lots of times.
Well, yeah. Once you can figure out all the comfort things and all the bells and whistles you want to do to it, it'll be a fun one to wear to shows.
Well, it already is. Like I found this electrical cooling system. This company makes this.
Is it the one I showed you? The one I sent you the card of? When I saw you at the show, I said, "Here's a card." I gave you a card of a booth where the guy does helmet fan control systems.
Yeah, because I went to his booth on. You weren't at the show on Sunday, right?
Well, I saw it. No, I was there. I passed that card to you as I was leaving.
Right, but but you were not there on Sunday.
Right.
And I went to his booth on Sunday and I bought a set of the fans. But also since then, I found there's this company, I can't remember the name of the company, but they make this white plastic collar that you can wear. And it's rechargeable. And after you've charged up, you push the button to turn on, and there's a pair of fans inside which pull in the outside ambient air. It passes it over these induction coils, which actually, when electricity is passed through them, they turn cold. And in doing so, by blowing the air over it, it chills the air, and then it has ducts inside it, so it blows the air out of the collar up and around your head. I bought one of those. Oh my God, that thing works amazing. And it will run for up to 6 hours continuous on the onboard.
Do you need to modify it? You're going to put it inside the helmet?
No, I'm gonna modify it so I can put it inside the helmet. I've already gone and modified the helmet by making the holes on the back of Mastercom's head. There is a raised sort of like
looks like
cylinder.
A port. It looks like a port. Yeah.
It looks like a computer recharge port, or like something you would use for connecting his memory to some frame's memory. Anyways, I made holes. There's a ring of like 6 holes in it that I made larger so that it can use to suck in air. And I'm going to use one of those fans from what I bought at convention, and then use the electrical cooling system so that it will then blow that cold air up over the top of my head and down over my face.
Brilliant.
And that'll make a huge difference, because again, ran out of time, and the inside of my helmet, the eyes were fogging up just a little bit.
So
the
air will fix that.
Yeah, the cold air will fix that. It will no longer fog up, and Max will be a much happier, more comfortable droid.
Well, Max, this was really fun. I had a fun time working with you on that at the show, and being at the show with you. It was a really great celebration this year. Again, thank you for telling everybody here about your entire process of making Mastercom.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to thank our fans and listeners for sticking with us. And I hope they will continue to do so, because there's going to be a lot more stuff. But again, I can't talk about stuff until stuff comes out. So
it's okay. We got more shows.
There's lots of cool stuff coming out, but we can't talk about it till it comes out. And sometimes that doesn't always work into the release of the episodes. So,
well, that's okay. As long as people get to learn about it eventually. Once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this 12th episode. We're always looking for more listeners who would like to go behind the scenes with us. So please help share the show. Visit us on our Facebook group, like us, tell your friends. We would love to hear your feedback over there. If you could, comment on the show anywhere you see it, where you're listening to it, we'll get to it.
If people have questions for me, they have questions about things I've worked on and other things of that nature, feel free to contact us through our Facebook group and send us questions. If you have topics you'd like to suggest and ask about,
we want to hear. Absolutely. You can send us a tweet at skywalkingpod and use the hashtag MaxEFX. That's MAX EFX. We are part of the Skywalking Network. Skynet. There we go. Where you can also find other great shows like classic Marvel Star Wars comics, the YouTube show Collectopolis, the Neverland Clubhouse, Star Warsologies, Talking Apes, Totally Tell Me Everything, and the flagship show Skywalking Through Neverland. And look for the Skywalking Network YouTube show Today in Star Wars history, your daily Star Wars history lesson. Until next time, this is Kevin.
This is Max.
And that's a wrap.
Jein, stop this crazy thing.